Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions, the place where silence cuts deeper than words. Let's talk about what happened before she ever spoke again. The fork never hit the plate. That's the part one can't get out of my head. She raised it halfway, her hand trembling just a little. The bite of salmon paused in the air like it suddenly weighed too much. Then she put it down without touching her food, stood up slowly, and walked out of the room. No words, no eye contact, no explanation. That was 33 days ago. Since then, I've counted every step she's taken past me. Not out loud, that would make me sound insane, but mentally like a man slowly going mad in his own home. Lila has crossed in front of me 47 times without so much as a glance. She's closed exactly 11 doors in my face. She's scrolled through her phone while I've sat beside her, tears quietly leaking from my eyes like a broken faucet nobody bothers to fix. At some point, I stopped asking her what was wrong. Not because I stopped caring, but because I started realizing the silence was the message. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She didn't even sigh. She just stopped seeing me. You know what's worse than hearing, "I don't love you anymore"? Hearing nothing at all. I tried everything. I left notes. I cooked her favorite pasta, put the basil on top just the way she liked. I even sat through one of those dumb true crime documentaries she's obsessed with, nodding like I wasn't dying inside. Nothing changed. And maybe it would have gone on forever, this quiet kind of dying, if not for that morning. One stupid, gray, silent morning. I was brushing my teeth. My suitcase was already in the hallway, not packed in anger, just packed like someone who knew the storm had passed and left nothing worth rebuilding. I looked at her through the mirror. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall like it might eventually talk back. And in that second, I realized something terrifying. If I stayed, I'd disappear entirely. So I walked. No shouting. No, "You'll regret this." Not even a note. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was what Lila would do the moment I was gone, and the truth behind her silence. It shattered every version of our past I thought I knew. The motel I ended up at had a flickering vacancy sign that buzzed like a dying insect. Room 12 smelled like cleaning supplies and forgotten lives, but it was quiet, honest, heavy quiet. Not the suffocating kind I left behind. I spent the first night staring at the ceiling fan, listening to its rhythmic creak like it was mocking me. I didn't cry. I just kept replaying the sound of Lila setting down that untouched fork. That was the last noise she made in my direction. The next morning, I drove to the only place I thought might make sense, the hardware store where I used to work part-time years ago. It was just to feel something familiar. I didn't talk to anyone. I just walked the aisles like a man looking for a memory. That's when I got the message. A single text from a number I didn't recognize. No words, just a photo. It was Lila, smiling, sitting on a blanket at the lake. Next to her was a man, tan, sculpted, laughing with his head tilted back like a toothpaste commercial. Her hand was on his knee. My stomach dropped so fast I had to sit down on a stack of mulch bags just to keep from falling over. I stared at the photo for 5 minutes before I noticed the date stamp at the bottom corner. 3 weeks ago. Right in the middle of her silent treatment. While I was scraping burnt lasagna off the casserole dish, she was out playing house with someone else. I didn't reply. I just sat there, holding my phone like it had exploded. The store manager walked by and asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was just reading a bad email. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid there, in that motel bed, trying to make sense of how long I had been replaced before I even knew I was missing. The next morning, I did something weak. Something I'm embarrassed to even write. I went back home, not to move back in, but to see. I parked down the street and waited in my car. 5 hours. No sign of her. Then at 8:17 p.m. Headlights turned into the driveway. She wasn't alone. What I saw next made my heart split in two. I told myself I was just there to observe, just to confirm what I already suspected. But as her car pulled in and parked beneath the motion-activated porch light, something inside me twisted so violently I felt physically sick. She stepped out first. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, something she only did when she was relaxed, laughing, carefree. I hadn't seen her like that in months. Then the passenger door opened. He didn't get out right away. He just sat there for a moment, like he was claiming the space, the silence, the home I once believed was mine. When he finally emerged, I recognized him instantly. Travis DeMarco, the guy from her office holiday party 2 years ago. I remembered him because I'd shaken his hand, and he'd looked at me like I was the valet. At the time, I brushed it off. Lila told me I was being insecure. Maybe I was. But now he was here, at our house, walking up our steps beside her like he belonged. They didn't kiss. They didn't even touch. But their body language was loud enough to scream through the windshield. She glanced over her shoulder once, toward the street, and I ducked instinctively. That one look, the way her eyes scanned the darkness, it felt like she knew I might be watching. I left before they went inside. I didn't want to see him sitting at our kitchen table or worse, in our bed. I drove back to the motel with my hands shaking and my heart somewhere near my stomach. I sat in the parking lot for a long time before going in, just staring at the steering wheel like it might offer me advice. That night, I couldn't decide what hurt more, the betrayal or the fact that she didn't even try to hide it. Her silence had been a slow kill, but this was the blade twisting. I didn't sleep, couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her opening that door for him, welcoming him into the space we built together. At 4:03 a.m., I opened my phone, tapped on our wedding photo in my gallery, and stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then, without flinching, I deleted it. Not out of anger, but because I couldn't stand the lie anymore. I didn't know what came next, but something inside me was starting to shift. I wasn't just hurt, I was changing. The next morning, I did something I swore I wouldn't. I went back, not to confront her, not to scream or throw accusations. I didn't even go with a plan. I just needed to retrieve a box of old tax documents I had stupidly left in the storage bench under the stairs. That was the excuse I told myself. Maybe part of me wanted to see if she looked guilty. Maybe I hoped she'd ask why I left. But when I opened the door with my spare key, the house felt like a stranger's. It smelled different, like expensive candles and cologne that didn't belong to me. The pictures on the hallway wall were rearranged. Some were gone altogether. A jacket I didn't recognize hung on the coat rack. And in the corner of the living room, tucked beside the armchair she never used when I was home, was a leather-bound notebook. Her journal. I stared at it for a long time, torn between respecting her privacy and needing answers she refused to give. In the end, I opened it not to invade but to understand. The first entry was dated 6 months ago. Her handwriting was sharp, angry. It didn't read like someone confused or in pain. It read like someone slowly unraveling a secret. She wrote things like, "I feel suffocated," and "He doesn't even notice I'm already gone." Page after page painted me as invisible, boring, dull. She talked about Travis. First, just his name in passing. Then more frequently. Then intimately. I stopped reading after I reached an entry where she described the way he made her laugh. She said, "When I'm with Travis, I don't feel like someone's wife. I feel like myself." I wanted to throw the journal across the room, but I didn't. I closed it gently, placed it exactly where I found it, and walked into our bedroom one last time. My nightstand drawer was empty. She'd taken the watch I'd gotten engraved for her birthday last year, but my half-used cologne bottle and the hoodie she used to steal were untouched, like she had carefully edited me out of her life, piece by piece. As I was leaving, I noticed the trash can in the kitchen. On top of a crumpled receipt and an empty wine bottle was the yellow post-it note I had written her weeks ago. "I miss you," it had said. It wasn't even folded. That was the moment the sadness turned into something else. Something heavier, darker. I didn't want her back. I wanted my dignity. I wanted clarity. And for the first time, I wanted closure, even if I had to create it myself. I wasn't proud of what I did next. I didn't plan it. It just happened. Later that night, back in the motel room, I opened my old laptop. It was synced with our home email account, the one we used for bills, travel plans, furniture deliveries. I hadn't touched it in weeks. I wasn't even sure it still worked, but it booted up like a ghost opening its eyes. No password change, no logout, and buried deep among receipts and spam, I found it. One email, unread, from her to him, sent 4 days before I left. Subject line, next steps. It was short, 2 paragraphs, but I read it 12 times. She said she needed more time before making the house ours. She promised she'd handle it delicately. She wrote, he's not confrontational. He won't fight. It'll be clean. Like I was a stain on her life she was already halfway through scrubbing out. That broke something in me, not because she'd moved on, but because she thought I wouldn't even care enough to make a sound. Like I was too small, too quiet, too soft to even notice being erased. I sat there, stunned, trying to figure out if I'd been in denial this whole time, or if she had truly mastered the art of pretending. Pretending she was still married. Pretending she was just tired. Pretending that the silence wasn't planned. All while scheduling a future with someone else in the house I still remembered building shelf by shelf. And suddenly, I wasn't sad anymore. I was humiliated. All those dinners I made, the texts I sent, the way I kept hoping her silence was temporary. It hadn't been silence. It had been permission. Permission for her to detach without guilt. A slow withdrawal from a life she'd already replaced. And I, like the fool I was, had waited for her to come back, like a porch light left on for someone who never planned to return. I closed the laptop and stared at the motel ceiling until dawn. That morning I made one final decision. Not out of revenge. Not even out of anger. But because I realized something terrifying. I had no idea who I'd married. And if I stayed in that version of my past any longer, I might never find out who I was either. I didn't tell anyone I was coming back to town. I wasn't even sure I was allowed to. I just showed up 3 days later with a rental van, a locked jaw, and the resolve of a man who'd finally understood the silence wasn't accidental. It was strategic. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake, coldly, fully awake. The front door code had been changed. Not surprising. But what was surprising? My name wasn't on the mailbox anymore. Just hers. And the name D. Marlowe scribbled underneath in black marker. I don't know if it was deliberate cruelty or lazy arrogance, but it hit like a punch. I didn't knock. I didn't want a scene. Instead, I drove to a storage facility on the edge of town, where we used to keep Christmas decorations and old college textbooks. I still had a key to the unit. When I opened it, I froze. Half the unit was empty. Gone was the couch we bought during our 2nd year of marriage. The one we spent weekends curled up on watching crime documentaries. Gone were the framed prints we picked out at that art fair in Vermont. In their place were new boxes, labeled in her handwriting. Wendell's stuff. I opened one and found my books, my sweaters, the ceramic mug I made her during our try-pottery phase. It was wrapped in bubble wrap like a leftover relic she didn't want but couldn't bring herself to trash. As I stood there, stunned, a U-Haul truck pulled up beside my van. A man stepped out, early 30s, sharp jawline, confident posture, and carrying my couch. It was him. I knew it instantly even without a formal introduction. Travis Marlowe, smiling like he belonged in a place I'd been gently evicted from without notice. He nodded at me, not recognizing who I was. I didn't correct him. I watched as he and some movers unloaded the couch into a neighboring unit. That couch didn't belong to them. It belonged to Sunday mornings, to long naps, to quiet comfort, and now it was being filed away like a spare part of someone else's future. I left without saying a word, because what would I even say? Thanks for recycling my life? No, I wasn't ready for confrontation. Not yet, but something had shifted again. A quiet decision was building. If she could turn my life into storage labels and sale items, then maybe it was time I stopped looking for closure and started writing my own ending. A week after the storage unit, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. Then a voicemail dropped, short and clipped. Mr. O'Connell, your reservation for 2 at Jasper's is still confirmed for 7:30 tonight. Just a reminder. I hadn't made any reservation. Jasper's was the place we went for anniversaries. White tablecloths, dim lights, a place where you whispered instead of talked. I hadn't set foot in that place since our last anniversary, which she skipped. Claimed she had a migraine. Said I was making a big deal out of nothing. I almost deleted the message. But something stopped me. Curiosity, maybe, or instinct, or whatever part of me hadn't yet fully accepted that I'd been written out of the script. So I went. I didn't make a scene. I didn't even go inside at first. I sat across the street in my car, watching through the restaurant's wide front window. The hostess stood near the podium. Then, at exactly 7:32, they walked in. Her in that emerald dress I bought her 2 birthdays ago. Him in a blazer that didn't suit him but tried to. She said something to the hostess, smiling. The woman frowned, looked down at the book, then gestured toward the street. Lila followed her finger, and her face dropped when she saw me. I wasn't hiding. I didn't move. I wanted her to see me, to feel it. She didn't come outside. She didn't wave. She just turned around, said something quickly to Travis, and they left. No dinner. No confrontation. No apology. The reservation had been made under my name. Whether that was her mistake or some twisted message, I don't know. But I knew right then she hadn't expected me to be a presence anymore. She had counted on my silence. She thought I'd vanished into some motel void, licking my wounds quietly until the paperwork showed up. But I was still here. Later that night, I walked into that restaurant and sat alone at the reserve table. The waiter looked confused but didn't ask. I ordered the same dish I always had. When the bill came, I tipped big and signed my full name. Let them see it. Let them remember it. Because I was done being the man she edited out of her story. Now I was the one writing the final chapter. 2 months passed. No texts. No emails. No apology. I thought I'd be bitter. I thought I'd be counting the days like a prisoner scratching tallies into a wall. But something strange happened. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped staring at old photos. I stopped asking questions that no longer needed answers. It wasn't overnight. But day by day, moment by moment, I rebuilt the parts of myself she had quietly dismantled. I moved into a small apartment on the west side of town. Nothing special, just a second-floor walk-up with creaky floors and a window that lets in too much morning light. But it's mine. I bought a second-hand couch that doesn't carry memories, started cooking meals for one, and even joined a local woodworking class. Turns out I'm decent with my hands. There's something deeply healing about carving a block of something solid when your life used to feel like vapor. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. Silence is powerful when you choose it. One afternoon, she finally broke hers. A long message. It said she was sorry, that she'd made a mistake, that she hoped I was okay. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because the version of me who would have begged for that message no longer existed. The real closure didn't come from anything she said. It came when I looked in the mirror one morning and didn't see a man waiting to be chosen. I saw someone who finally chose himself. Last weekend, I went to Jasper's alone again. Same table. This time, I brought a book and ordered dessert too. I laughed at something the waiter said and noticed a young couple a few tables over smiling at me, like they were curious about my calm. I didn't explain. Some things you earn the quiet way. So yeah, she wouldn't speak to me for weeks, until I left. And I'm grateful now that I did. Because walking away isn't weakness. It's the first step toward walking into something better. Thanks for listening. And if you've ever experienced anything like this, or you enjoy stories that peel back the layers of love, loss, and starting over, consider following Reddit Confessions. And before you go, tell us in the comments. What's one historical event that completely changed how you see the world? We'll be reading. Until next time, stay strong.